Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today I'm going to start a new series on Ableton 101, particularly how to use Ableton Live for guitar players. I say for guitar players because essentially Ableton began its life as a tool for DJs and electronic musicians to be able to easily arrange and trigger on the fly and have different effects and things on audio clips that would be used for doing live performances, hence the name Ableton Live. However, Ableton's been out for a very long time now. It's on version 11 as of the recording of this video. And it's really a full-featured DAW or digital audio workstation. You can do high levels of production with it. And I see a lot of the YouTube guitar channels I watch, a lot of the guitar players are using Ableton Live now, which I think is great. I've been using it since 06. I ended up getting a free copy of the light version with an audio interface I bought. And while initially I thought it was very strange looking and it took me a while to wrap my head around, now I'm just really locked into it and love it. So I wanted to make this video for particularly guitar players, bass players, musicians, non-electronic musicians, getting into Ableton Live and show how to quickly get in and navigate and start making music and recording with it. So this series is not going to be as much focused on MIDI and things of that nature. It's going to be more on the audio side, but we will cover some MIDI stuff, particularly in terms of drum grooves and backing tracks and when MIDI makes a lot of sense to use for stuff like that. So with all that out of the way, let's hop over to Ableton Live and let's get started. Okay, so here we are at the home screen in Ableton. This is what you'll likely see when you fire up the program for the first time. We are in what's called Session View. Session View is basically a section of grids where you can put different audio files, or if it's a MIDI track, MIDI clips in each one of these grids. So each one can represent a different recording. For instance, I could have an intro guitar part here, a verse part here, chorus, bridge, verse, whatever. You know, each part can be a different piece of audio, and you can trigger them individually as well. That's kind of the feature and the hook of Ableton, because if we tab over, there's this arrangement view, which is like any other DAW. You hit play, the playhead goes from left to right down the timeline. You can have as many tracks as your computer will handle. That all works like every other DAW. So if you've done recording, this will be very familiar. But yeah, the session view is kind of what sets Ableton apart in having two different ways to work with audio. And as I record some examples, we'll dive a little deeper into that. A few other things about the interface. Obviously, it looks a little different. It's not trying to mimic graphically, a classic console with knobs and faders and stuff. It's more kind of vector based, and so that was a little weird for me at first because it just didn't represent what I was used to seeing. But you get over that pretty quickly. But up here is, again, your session view. This is where your audio files and MIDI files live. On the right side, these are return tracks, and then this is your master bus. So that works pretty well like most DAWs. And when I come over to arrangement view, we'll see those down here at the bottom as well. All the mixing is done in session view. This is where you have your fader view. So your mixing is there. And you can, if you have a dual monitor setup, you can turn on a second screen and drag that over to your secondary monitor. So if you wanted to have both views at one time, you can do that as well, which is pretty cool. You'll see these arrows here, and basically these are ways to collapse part of the screen if you don't need to take up the screen real estate. So if I want to get into, looking at effects and plugins, clips, anything like that, I can have the browser open over here, and that works. That works on both views. You can have it either way, but it's nice that you can kind of fold it away if you don't need to add a plugin and you want more screen real estate. That's a nice little feature. Down here, this can fold away as well, but I would recommend leaving this little left corner open for a while. This is really nice because whatever you mouse over, it tells you what it does. So, I mean, even now, I've been using Ableton since 06, and there are still some buttons and things that I'm like, that I haven't used in a while, and I can't always remember what they do, so that I'll pop this open and mouse over, like, oh yeah, that's right, it does that thing. So that's very handy. Don't sleep on that. When you're learning Ableton, that's a really good reference point to be able to go back and look and see what does what. And before I'm recording audio, I'm just going to hit the very basics at the top where the transport is. Obviously, play, stop, record. That's all very standard issue. The other thing, you have your tempo for the track. You can tap it in with a mouse click, or you can just click on here and type it in. Either way. And I'm not gonna exhaustively go over everything. I'm just gonna hit the stuff you would need to kind of get started right away. This is the time signature right now. We're in 4/4. This is the metronome. So if I click and highlight it, it turns it on. Excuse me. So if I hit play, we're going to hear the metronome. Also in this drop down, you can set a count in. So right now it's set to count in 2 bars. This works whether or not the metronome is turned on or turned off. So what that is if I hit record, I'm going to hear 2 bars before it starts recording. You see the countdown there. Now it's recording, but we're not hearing a metronome. If I was to click this, we hear the metronome. So if you're new to recording, basically, if you're going to be recording tracks that later other people are going to add on to, and especially if you're going to add loops, I would highly recommend recording to a metronome. That way everything is in time, and you can add stuff on later pretty quickly. I'm not one of these that advocates everything has to hit the grid and line up to the grid. I do like the fact that when music's played, it's played by humans and there's a little push-pull, give and take. But if you are going to use loops and things down the line, it is a pretty good idea to at least have your rhythm tracks, your main tracks done to the metronome and fairly on point. Now, if I hit tab to come over, we'll see a little bit of audio here. That's where I let it record. I'm just going to delete that. So that's kind of as much as you need to know in the interface to get started recording. Of course, the main thing is that you need to get signal into the program. So I'm going to come over to options and we're going to look at the audio interface side. If you're on Windows like I am, you're going to want to use an ASIO driver. And in the drop down, you're going to see all the drivers and devices you've installed. You just pick whichever one you're using. Right now, I'm using a Zoom L8 mixer. Input and output configuration lets you select which inputs and outputs that Ableton is going to look at. Also, if they're going to be mono or stereo inputs. I just leave them all turned on. Same thing with the output. I think it saves a little bit of computer, horsepower, if you will, to turn some of these off if you're not going to be using them. However, I think it's minimal to the point where I never bother trying to turn any off to save power. Hardware setup will generally open up your control panel for whatever you happen to be using. Again, if you're some of this, I know some of you guys are going to be very familiar with this, so just be patient or skim through. But for anyone who's new to recording, I'll explain what the buffer size is. Basically, the buffer size tells how many samples your computer can buffer as it's keeping up with playback, recording, and so forth. So the higher the buffer size, the less work your computer has to do because it's able to get ahead of it. The lower the buffer size, the harder your computer has to work because it's doing more of the work in real time, so to speak. And if you're recording directly into the software, meaning if you're using a guitar plugin and you want to record directly in, and you want to also hear that plugin as you're recording, you want to set the buffer size as low as possible because that will reduce the amount of latency. Latency being how long it takes from when you play a note to when you hear it. So I haven't set it 512 samples because I am recording with my Helix, so I have direct monitoring that way. I don't need to monitor through plugins. So I have that sample size set really pretty high, so that gives my computer plenty of power when it comes to mixing and running plugins. If I were going to record this, I would try to drop it down to 128 or even 64 samples if my computer would handle it. So, and a lot of that's going to come down to how many tracks you have active, how many plugins you have on. Obviously, the simpler your session is, the more things you have turned off, the more your computer can put its resources towards just recording you. So that's a little bit of a balancing act you're going to have to kind of work with on your own setup to see what works. Again, if you're recording using a pedal or some outboard gear to where you're not, you don't need to hear your guitar sound monitored through the software, I like keeping the sample size higher because it helps the computer run smoother. And if I'm not needing direct monitoring, I don't need to run a low sample size. So that's how that works. That's pretty much all you need to have defined to be able to start recording. Now I'm in this channel here, and actually I have it turned on to hear the main stereo output of my mixer, which is why you see this line moving. Also, this is record armed. If I don't have these tracks armed, you don't see anything happening in the meters. When it's armed, that means it's ready to record. You're not hearing monitoring through the software because the monitor's turned off. If I turn it on, you hear it coming through the mixer, and now you're hearing it coming through Ableton. That's why there's a little bit of an odd sound, because there is some latency and delay. So you're hearing my voice, then you're hearing my voice slightly delayed. And that comes back to the sample size and the latency we were talking about a second ago. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to come down to the stereo channel that my guitar is going to be running through. And I'm going to show you a couple ways you can record audio and move it around. So I'm going to set this count into 1 bar. And I'm going to turn the metronome on as well. I'm going to do the first bit of recording here in the arrangement view. Then I'll show you how to record in session view and show you how to move audio back and forth. So here we go. Okay, just a quick little chord progression there. Listen back. So I did the same thing twice, but the first one I kind of flubbed on the first chord a little bit. So when I double click this, I can see the basically what's recorded. And right now it's not a loop, it's just a piece of audio. So let's say I wanted it to be a loop. I can click on loop here, and now I can define where it loops. So basically what I want to do is I want to tell it to start and just do the second one basically. And you hear the first chord hit twice because I didn't define the end of the loop. Now when I pull this back, so now we're just hearing that part looped versus the whole thing. So that's pretty cool. And I can drag this out, and it doesn't matter how far I drag it out. It's just going to play the section that I have looped. It's not going to, unless I go back and change that, it's not going to play that first part, right? Which is pretty cool. Now, if I'm just laying down a basic track, all it needs a good solid measure too, and then I can drag it out, and that can be something I can work against. And so that's in the arrangement view. Now, let's say I like this, but I want to start working in session view. It's really simple to move it over. I can click on this, hit tab, and then drop it into session view. Now when I play it here, it's the same thing. It's the same piece of audio, but now we're working with it on the grid. Now let's say I just want to record straight into session view, straight into the grid, excuse me, instead of the other way, the arrangement view. Since this is armed, if this wasn't armed, these would be, basically stop buttons. So if you have, something playing, I can hit stop and kill it. But when it's armed, they'll turn to circles, meaning that when I hit this now, it's going to record. I'm going to turn the metronome back on. We're going to get a 1 bar count in, and then I'll play something else, I guess. Okay, so same thing as before. Let's say I just wanted the second time I went through it. I would do the exact same thing. Loop is already turned on. We'll pull this down and then set this here. And now, not perfect, but you get the idea. Now the audio can go the other way. I can click, hold, drag, drop. And now we have the 2 parts. Now, if you notice, they look grayed out. The reason for that is Ableton knows that the last thing we did, the current thing we were doing was playing around in session view, and this clip is playing. So even though I've changed something on the timeline, if I hit play, we're just hearing the second loop because that's what's active. The way we can get the timeline to basically become what we're going on, reanimate, become our go-to, is this orange button, which is return to or back to arrangement. And see, as you see, I mouse over down at the bottom left, it tells you. So now we see this is back up to the forefront, and so whatever's on the timeline will get played. So just think about that as if you're going to go back and forth and play around. anytime you're playing and doing things on the session side, when you come to arrangement, you need to use that back to arrangement button to return to allowing Ableton to follow what's on the timeline. So that's really all you need in terms of getting audio in and how to record. Sorry about that. So that kind of covers the basics. If we wanted to add, let's just say we wanted to add another guitar part. So just to do things from scratch, I'm going to add a track, Control T or Command T on the Mac. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to select the same input because it's still my Helix. I'm going to unarm this track because I don't want that to do anything. I want to just record on here. Also, I don't know how long I want to play or what I want to play really. So I'm going to trigger this from the session view. So it just plays that loop over and over again. And I don't have to worry about it switching or going to the other part. I'm just going to play over this part. So I'm going to leave the metronome off because this clip is going to essentially be keeping time for me since I record it to the click. I don't need to hear the click, but I will get a 1 bar count in. So let's do that. All right, so noodled around a little bit. Now I want to hit play. And I can use the faders if I want to bring that back down so we hear more of the lead. Now let's say I like it. I want to bring it over here. And furthermore, since I just played over the verse, I'm going to drag that out. I say verse, whatever, part A. So now I do back to arrangement. Now this is what we have on our arrangement. All right, pretty basic stuff. Now you can also loop from the arrangement view. And if you see this bracket up here, this is what defines the loop area. There's a shortcut. If I select this and right click, I can say loop selection, and that sets your start and stop. It also automatically turns this on. So that's your loop on and off for this view. Now let's say I liked part of what I did on the track 2, but not all of what I did. All right, let's just say I didn't like the beginning. Another cool thing you can do with the bracket and the markers, which defines the loop, is I'm going to bring it to the first part of the section, and I'm going to cut it off before the next part of the section. All right. Now, what I just did there in terms of zoom is when you get right here, you see it turn into a magnifying glass. Click. If you take the mouse up, it zooms out. Down, it moves down, it zooms in. And then left and right. So that's a pretty handy way to quickly grab and zoom and get in there and see what you need to see. All right. I actually don't need a loop, so I'm going to turn that off. But the buttons on the either side of the loop are your punch in and punch out buttons. So because I have this section marked and because I have the punch in and out, whenever I hit record, it's going to take care of the punching in and out for me. So I can just play over this one section and the rest of it will be unaffected. So let's give that a try. So we got us in and out. We didn't have to worry about starting and stopping or recording over the next part. So that's a pretty handy feature, especially when you're tracking, more leads or intricate parts, or, if you did the whole song, got all of it right, but one little thing. That punch in and punch out feature is really cool. And again, you just define your points with these brackets. And the reason I like the right click loop selection thing is sometimes if you have a 5, 6, 8 minute project, you don't even remember where the loop brackets are, or if you're way zoomed out and it's in a small spot, it can be kind of hard to, not hard, but you got to zoom in and find it and all that. So that's where I like to just come in and, if I know what I want to do, just come in, right click, loop selection. I don't have to go chasing down the loop brackets at that point. Just remember that every time you do the loop selection, it does automatically turn on the looping. So if you're not wanting to loop, you just want to punch out, remember to turn that off. All right. So that's basically, the 101 of what you need to get audio into Ableton to start recording. Again, I did Control T to add a track, but everything you have shortcuts for it, are in the menu as well. So using either the create or the edit menu. So there's a whole lot more obviously to Ableton. I mean, way more. We haven't really gotten into much of anything yet. But I just wanted to, if you were brand new to Ableton, maybe like me, you bought an audio interface and it came with this piece of software and you don't know where to start. I wanted to do this video as a very, very basic place to start, where you know how to record your guitar, loop it if you need to, record other parts, punch in and out, get your audio face talking to Ableton. So I hope this was very helpful. If you are brand new to Ableton, if you're new or more intermediate, anything you would like to see me cover on Ableton Live or tutorials you'd like to see me do, please put that in the comments below. Like I said, this is the first of what I hope to make a series out of. If it's something that you guys want, I'm happy to do it. I love Ableton a lot, and I've had friends that have picked up the software, and I've tried to help them through it because it's a bit of a learning curve, but I think it's definitely worth it once you get to the other side, because there's a lot of fun stuff you can do. There's some unique types of plugins and audio manipulation you can do with Ableton that is just a lot of fun. And for me, it's a great songwriting tool, and I've used it also for production and mixing. It works great for that. Even, I hesitate to say mastering because I'm not a mastering engineer, but no, just enough to be dangerous. But you can do everything with Ableton. Whatever VST plugins you want to use, it can pretty much do all of it. So anyway, again, let me know what you would like to see in future videos about Ableton Live. Let me know if this was helpful to you with getting started. And yeah, hopefully we'll make a fun series out of this. So thanks for watching. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, blah, blah, blah. You know what to do. Till the next one, we'll see you.